Hello, Anna. Hello, Flo. Can you hear me?
Good
Hello, yes.
morning.
Good morning.
Can you
Hello.
please open? Yeah. Okay.
Nice
Hi.
to see you.
Good to see you.
How are you, Shiba?
We will start in a moment, but we have a book launch event before that. Then after we will have the panel discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Fine.
So I'll be on standby. I just close everything. I'll be here listening.
everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion, Reflection from COP28 and Looking Towards COP29. I'm Shiba Chenoli, an academic from the Department of Geography and also the co-chair of University Malaya Climate Change Advisory Committee. Further, I'll be the moderator for today's panel session. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Amy Morris to give her opening remarks. Dr. Amy Morris is the former board member of University Malaya, the executive chair of SciPark Resources, and the commissioner at the Water Commission of Malaysia.
Good afternoon and hello everyone, both online and at the studio. The future banker is a scientist. This is something that I have started to believe strongly in since the time I became more involved in actions to address climate change as the CEO of Maybank Investment Banking Group over 5 years ago, and which became more pronounced during my tenure at the board of University Malaya. Pursuant to that, this gathering of minds today holds special significance as we commemorate University Malaya's first ever delegation to a Conference of Parties or COP last year. 4 of our distinguished academics attended COP28 in Dubai in December 2023, along with myself under the Malaysian delegation, each having the honor of a speaking role at various platforms of COP28. This participation marked a historic milestone for University Malaya, not only showcasing our commitment to global climate action, but as a new aspiration for the student communities. COP28 in Dubai, as other COPs, had its share of failures and successes. What cannot be taken away was the success in its significant emphasis on the role of education and the engagement of young people in climate action within the broader COP discourse of global collaboration and innovative solutions in addressing climate change. For the future banker to be a scientist, it needs to begin with our student communities appreciating both the issues of climate change as well as their solutions, which would typically need forms of capital funding or investment to actualize their execution. University Malaya's participation in COP28 was not just symbolic, but crucial. The involvement, particularly in the Open Science panel, highlighted several key aspects. Firstly, that leadership in research is critical. This is to push forward for sustainable solutions and to appropriately influence policymaking on a global scale. Secondly, the commitment to open science. This can also become a critical success factor. By advocating for open access to scientific knowledge, we are also fostering a culture of transparency and collaboration, both of which are essential for tackling global challenges. Thirdly, empowering future leaders. By being present at COP28, we also provided our students with a platform to engage with global leaders, thus preparing them to be the change makers of tomorrow. In today's panel discussion, members and friends of the delegation will engage in a candid conversation about their journey to COP28, sharing lived experiences, key takeaways, and next steps. This dialogue aims to inspire other academic staff to participate in future COPs, in line with our Vice-Chancellor's thrust to further internationalize University Malaya. I am also pleased to announce the launch of the Climate Change e-book, compiled by the Climate Change Advisory Committee. This e-book is a testament to our collective efforts and dedication to addressing climate change and will serve as a valuable resource for our community and beyond. The presence of University Malaya at COP28 is to be celebrated for several reasons. Firstly, it enhanced visibility and influence. It positioned us as an organization that has influence and ability to drive impactful change. Secondly, it strengthened collaborations and partnerships globally, opening doors that will benefit our research and initiatives in the long run. And thirdly, it elevated standards of educational excellence, reaffirming our commitment to integrating sustainability into our curriculum, research, and campus operations. In conclusion, COP28 was not just an event. It was a milestone in our journey towards a sustainable future. University Malaya's active participation was a testament to our commitment to global climate action and our leadership in education and research. As we reflect on the successes of COP28 and look forward towards COP29, let us remain committed to our mission of advancing knowledge, fostering innovation, and preparing our students to address the challenges of tomorrow with both courage and creativity. As I said in the opening, the future banker is a scientist. We need to be armed with the knowledge and ability to stand tall for a sustainable future. Financial minds need to provide the capital, but it is the scientific mind that will solve our future challenges. And now back to the studio.
Thank you, Dr. Amy Morris.
Morris. Next, I invite Associate Professor Dr. Helena Warki to launch the Climate Change ebook. Dr. Helena is from the Department of International and Strategic Studies at and also the co-chair of University Malaya Climate Change Advisory Committee. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this hybrid panel discussion on reflections from COP28 and looking towards COP29. I want to take this opportunity to introduce you to the University Malaya Climate Change Advisory Committee, which is the main organizer for today's event. This committee was formed in 2023 under the auspices of the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation. It consists of academics working on various aspects of climate change, and Dr. Shiba, your moderator for today, and myself are the current co-chairs of this committee. The committee advises the university leadership on the university's research priorities in climate change research and facilitates UM's involvement in climate change governance at the international level. In line with this effort, the committee has put together an ebook entitled Sustainability in Action, University Malaya's Climate and Resilience Research. This ebook showcases pioneering climate change and resilience projects at University Malaya. We are delighted to officially launch this ebook today, and we would like to acknowledge the team that worked so hard to make this ebook a reality, especially Professor Shaliza Ibrahim, the former DVC of Research and Innovation in Professor Surinder Paul Kaur, and Mr. Khalil Munawar. Here are some snapshots from the book, including a foreword from the current DVC Research and Innovation, Professor Kaharuddin Dimyati, the book's table of contents, and some project pages. We are committed to continuously updating this book to ensure that it remains a timely reflection of the university's ongoing commitment to addressing climate change. The ebook is now live. Please scan the link to view the ebook and share it widely among your network. Thank you. Welcome again. Let us begin the panel discussion on reflection from COP28 and looking towards COP29. Attention to the online participants. Please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function at the Zoom, and also a comment at the YouTube channel that will allow you to submit your questions during the session, and we will address the questions at the end of the session. So last year, University Malaya had its first ever delegation at the 28th Conference of Parties, meeting of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. As you heard from Dr. Amy Morris, 4 academics, including myself, attended the COP28 as a part of Malaysian delegation's party overflow. So main goal of this sharing session is to inspire academic staff to participate in COP meetings, which align with the Vice Chancellor's vision to further internationalize University Malaya. So first, allow me to introduce our panelists. To my immediate left is Professor Shaliza Ibrahim, former Deputy Vice Chancellor at University Malaya. She is also the Chair of Renewable Energy at University Tenaga Nasional, UNITEN,
and honorary professor at the Institute of Ocean and Earth Sciences. And there is actually a slight change in the program. Unfortunately, one of our panelists, Dr. Gillian Uy, cannot participate in today's session as she is unwell. And seated beside Prof. Shalisa is Ms. Aro Ayoni, an undergraduate student pursuing environmental studies in the Department of Geography at UM. She is also the co-founder and communication director at Climate Action Malaysia, which is known as CAMI. And joining us online are Dr. Pirani, Dr. Anna Pirani. She is a senior research associate at Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change, Italy, and Dr. Florence Coglioni, a researcher from the National Institute of Geography and Oceanography and Applied Geophysics in Italy, and Mr. TPR Chow Loon Wei, co-director of University Technology Malaysia, Low Carbon Asia Research Center. Welcome to all. So let us start the panel discussion. I will start with Prof. Shalisa. Prof, could you please share your experience as a member of advisory panel for the Malaysian Ministry of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change in preparation for COP28 in Dubai last year, as well as your journey to COP as an academic at UM?
Thank you, Dr. Shiva. So last year, during my term as the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation, UM was appointed as the Climate Change Advisory Panel by the then Ministry of Natural Resources, Energy and Climate Change, and REC. And the letter of appointment was handed to us by the Minister himself, YB Nek Nazmi. It was the first time that UM was given this honor. And as the advisory panel, UM was designated under the Technology and Innovation Cluster, chaired by Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Zaki Abdul Hamid. And Tan Sri Zaki was a very proactive cluster chair, and he called a meeting every 2 weeks to discuss how we could contribute as a member of the advisory panel. And he got a team to prepare a report on the Malaysian case, covering the history of climate change governance, global trends, mitigation progress, gaps and challenges, and Malaysia's preparedness. We also planned programs to showcase at the Malaysia Pavilion. And for the UM team, we wanted UM to also be given the pass to attend COP28. This was the first time we had been honored, and we felt that we also would like to be present at COP. And when I asked Tan Sri of this possibility, he suggested that we organize something for the Malaysian Pavilion. And that was when we proposed for UM to convene a forum on open science. The topic was very pertinent for climate research because open science is about sharing research data sets, information and resources, and engaging with all stakeholders. And the topic of climate change is something that is relatable to everyone. So the Malaysian Open Science Platform also had recently been launched at that time, and it was a good opportunity to promote the initiative. And meanwhile, in UM, we organized ourselves in order to be more efficient in giving input as the advisory panel member, and therefore the Climate Change Advisory Committee was formed, comprising the members from different backgrounds as shared by Dr. Helena earlier. We, as a committee, compiled information on climate change research and expertise in UM, and we managed to see a very good list showing an interesting and diverse research landscape relating to climate change in UM itself. And this compilation is what has become the e-book that was launched a few minutes ago. And as Deputy Vice Chancellor, I had put up a paper to the top management to allocate funds for UM academics to participate at COP. And it was approved with the provision that each of the academic gets a speaking role at COP. And we then look for opportunities through our networks. And one of our colleagues, Dr. Helena, was invited by a Harvard team to be a panel speaker on methane reduction initiative. Another, Dr. Gillian, who unfortunately is not able to be here, spoke on education through the performing arts, and others participated in the UM forum. So with these efforts, UM was able to send delegates to COP28. It was the first time that UM academics attended COP meeting, And I think it was the first time that a Malaysian higher education institution convened a session at the Malaysian Pavilion.
Thank you very much, Professor Lisa. So next in line, I have Arul Ayudi. I understand that you have attended few COP meetings, right? So I believe you had the opportunity to meet regional youth activists, especially from Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Philippines, etc. So could you share your experience and the challenges related to the youth involvement and negotiation at COP?
So yes, this is already my last time Dubai was my third COP already. So the first COP participation was in Glasgow, COP26. At that time, as we know, it was COVID, so none of us could fly to Glasgow, but we were actively participating by sending an artwork that we created, but with the collaboration of Orang Asli women from Peninsular Malaysia. So we sent an artwork and also a film that we screened at Glasgow at that time. And then I was also at COP27 in Egypt, and also recently COP28. So in terms of challenges, of course, there are many challenges when it comes to young people going to COP, because as we know, even COP itself is not an accessible space. So it's very expensive to go to COP. I think one point I want people to understand is that if you want to do activism, if you think you want to contribute in climate justice activism, you don't have to go to COP, because it is very expensive, it is very far away, and what matters is the local actions that we do in our country. COP is just the summit of where all of these country delegates meet, and really where all the media's attention are in terms of climate activism. So in terms of challenges, one of the biggest challenges is funding. Luckily for my organization, we have been very lucky, supported by a lot of NGOs in Malaysia, internationally as well. We have been supported by a lot of feminist groups that fund us to go to these conferences and actually join and participate, for example, in the Women and Gender Constituency at UNFCCC, actively participating in the negotiations as well. And another challenge for young people would be making the time to actually be there. I'm very lucky that I am in and we have very, very supportive lecturers, a supportive environment that supports student activism to participate in climate justice activism, because I remember there was times where I couldn't participate classes physically because I went to COP, but all of my professors were very supportive in making sure that I can still be in class virtually, but at the same time also discussing whatever happened at COP in our classrooms as well, because in our environmental studies program in geography, it's really important that we are always aware about what's happening globally, right? So we bring what's outside, critical negotiations and discussions outside internationally, we bring it into the classroom and discuss it as well. So making the time, I know that not all young people, not all students can actually make the time and have the supportive environment to be at these COP spaces. So those are the biggest things when it comes to COPs, attending COPs, when it comes to the challenges, the actual funding, also having the time to go there. And another one, when it comes to UNFCCC and COP negotiations, is of course the badges. We know we have the government overflow badges and so on. But for NGOs and also young people, it might not be as easy as that. We usually get overflow badges. For example, if a university has an extra badge, we could get from those. I remember last time did tell me that you guys did not have extra badges. So I did reach out to other institutions as well and other NGOs to make sure that our indigenous representatives could also go to COP. So those are just the main challenges. And then the challenges when it comes to actually be there, because there's a lot of technical dialogues. You are meeting with a lot of scientists as well. You are meeting with a lot of UN special rapporteurs. And of course, the language that is talked about at COP, the language used are very technical. I remember my very first time going to COP, I was very, very overwhelmed. I went back home not understanding anything that was discussed at COP, and I needed time to process everything. So now that it is my third COP, I think I'm getting the grasp of it, and I'm also very lucky I got to meet our professors, our representatives at COP as well, so we could have that dialogue, what was discussed from the NGO perspective, the youth perspective, and also the researchers and the institutions perspective. So I think those are the challenges that I can talk about right now.
Excellent. Yeah, of course it is an overwhelming experience when you go to the COP first time, right? So now I will proceed with the online panelists. Dr. Pirani participated in our online discussion on the role of open science in future fostering collaborative solutions for resilient future during COP28 last year. So please share your experience at the Malaysian Pavilion and also as a negotiator representing your country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chinoli. It was a unique experience for me to join you at the Malaysian Pavilion, and this is very much thanks to Prof. Joy Pereira, who put us in contact. Just to give a very brief explanation of my role at the COPs. I'm a member of the Italian delegation, and as Italy, we work in the COP negotiations as part of the European Union. And I am one of the scientific technical advisors that makes up the expert teams of the European Union. And I follow the negotiations on adaptation, on issues related to science. There's an agenda item called Research and Systematic Observations, and the GST, the Global Stocktake. So I was very grateful to join the meeting that we held in the pavilion. And I wanted to say that my experience coming to the pavilion was unique. It was a really an opportunity to come to your country. And for me, that was incredibly enriching. First, to make these connections, to meet you, and also to listen to the work, for example, that Prof. Ibrahim described in implementing fair open data principles in Malaysia. It was remarkable. It's really a remarkable example, a leadership example that I could take back into the European context. And I think that also my role has been previously to being a negotiator. I was a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Technical Support Team. So I was the head of the team that implemented the assessment of the physical science basis. And in the IPCC, we made a particular effort to bring the fair data principles into play. And so the experience I saw that was being implemented in Malaysia was an incredible example that I think also the IPCC needs to learn from. I wanted also to share that I was lucky enough to arrive early to our session, and I watched the session led by Dr. Gillian Oy, who I'm very sorry is not here with us today. And for me, again, that's an area connecting arts, science, literacy, and education. It's one of the key areas where we can make progress in climate action. And I frankly found it moving to see the projects that she was showing us, the dialogues with local people in the local communities of fishermen, and the realities that they're actually living and hearing from them directly in combination with a sort of dimension of culture and arts. Really remarkable work. So I wanted to pick up a few points that I really took away from our open science session. And that is that the University of Malaysia is very much promoting cooperation, accessibility of the best available science, promoting the knowledge base for evidence-based policymaking, and of course, transparency and inclusivity in the knowledge and in the use of the best available science. And these are the principles that really are underpinning the work of the IPCC. So you're probably familiar with the assessment that the IPCC undertakes. And so it was extremely interesting for me to be in that context with you and see the direct relationship with how we are actually working in the IPCC context. And then, and it's based on that experience, that way of working, that is how science really informs the policy making. And so now I'm fortunate to have this role on the other side, so on the negotiation side. And these principles in underpinning the best available science being available to policymakers is what makes the negotiations, how they can be made robust, basically. So my role now in the negotiations is, for example, my experience at COP28 was really assuring the science basis of the global stocktake text. And it's thanks to the work done by the IPCC assessment, which I reiterate builds on the principles that the University of Malaya was promoting, that is how we could ensure that the best knowledge was being fed into those negotiations and the text. And it was an amazing experience for me the first time as a negotiator, seeing from the technical phase where you work hands-on around the table with other experts, and then it passes into the high-level ministerial phase, and there the connection is much harder. And so we have to work through the lead negotiators who then work through to the high-level delegation. And it's an experience where you have to essentially be, as a scientist, as an expert, you have to be sort of tuned in and ready to check on the spots and assure the scientific validity of the texts that are coming back from each stage of the negotiations, and be able to communicate why things might not be right, why things might be important to keep an eye on, things that maybe for the lead negotiators are not necessarily their top priorities. For example, how you articulate the need to comprehensively address complex and cascading risks in the future, and not necessarily just refer to, for example, tipping points. So sometimes you have to transmit the importance of the scientific information that you know full well is critical, and the breadth of the terminology is important to capture. But for the lead negotiators, and ultimately, when the texts are being checked by international lawyers and so on and so forth, they're not necessarily their priorities. So it's really an interesting experience to work at that interface. And maybe we can come back to that. So my intention here was just to share with you the sort of the full range of experience that I personally encountered at COP28. And really thank you again for having invited me, and we built this nice connection together. Thank you, Dr. Chinoli, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pirani, for sharing the experience. And yeah, of course, it's a pity that Dr. Gillian couldn't join us. So when the negotiators were discussing the phasing out of fossil fuels at COP28 in UAE, Dr. Florence Colini, a paleoclimate and ice sheet modeler, along with global youth, highlighted the disastrous implication of climate change-induced sea level rise through demonstration. Dr. Florence will share more about combining research and activism at the COP meeting. Dr. Florence.
Thank you, Shiba. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel discussion. I really would like to also say that I regret I couldn't came to the Malaysian Pavilion at the last COP. It was a very busy COP actually, so far I've been attending to 3 COPs as a SCAR representative. SCAR is the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, and it's a part of the Antarctic Treaty. And so the focus for us to be present at COP is to really deal with cryosphere changes and sea level rise, and then the impact of sea level rise on coastal populations in different parts of the world actually. And before speaking a bit about the science to activism, I just wanted to make this very small introduction about the fact that sea level rise is impacting different parts of the population, so small islands or low-lying populations that are in countries that do not have a lot of money or infrastructure to defend themselves against this kind of adaptation of climate change, and to implement adaptation plans that can really help them to face this kind of issues, and also impact countries that are very rich and are able to implement different adaptation solutions. And for me, when I started to come to COP, I was really, not that I was not aware about this reality, but I really faced it more strongly. I mean, this divide between the population that are able to implement adaptation plans and the others that are not. And I think this is a part of the, let's say, science to policy to adaptation that is seldom transferred to education and to school. And even though most of the children now in elementary school or high school or at university are asking us more often, what can we do concretely in more practical way to really face this kind of changes? I feel that there is not enough education about those aspects. And we are more educating about science. Of course, I'm a scientist personally, but I see that in schools there very few lectures or lessons about how to really implement concretely and to let's say face risks and what does it mean for the future, for example. So okay, after this short introduction, so I started to go to COP 3 years ago when I became the coordinator of the SCAR program. And the first COP, I was really an observer. So I definitely was in the blue zone where a lot of side events happens, where you can definitely outreach your science and reach different kind of people. So of course, when you are in the blue zone, different people from the governments or NGOs or activisms also that are allowed to enter in the blue zones are very curious to learn about different aspects of climate change, and could be atmosphere, ocean, ice, and different things. So I found myself speaking to different audience, which make the transfer of knowledge very challenging, because of course none of those people are scientists, but they also have a different background, which makes the exercise very interesting actually, because you definitely have to find the right words to really transfer the key message. And you have also to be sure what is the key message you want to transfer, because then after, as Anna was saying before, you have to transfer it to the negotiation rooms, and that's the hardest part of the COP, to my opinion. During the last COP, I followed more the negotiation part, in the sense that I was along with some of the negotiators that are attached to the Cryosphere Pavilion, and we went along to meet most of the delegations that as much as we could actually. I was really surprised. I mean, surprised or a bit naive, perhaps, when we met with the Minister of Science of the Antigua Barbuda. Antigua Barbuda is a small island in the Caribbean, and of course, in the future, they will face a large part of loss of territory because of sea level rise. And he didn't know about that. And so the thing is, he said that during the negotiation, I mean, such information is not transferred to the room because, as Anna said, it's not the priority. I mean, so we have to find the right keywords to really, transfer the few aspects of the science that is really important, and then all the rest is a bit cascading. But when he told that to us, he was very surprised, and so he asked us a lot of documentation, and he said, I will try to make it enter in the negotiation room, but that's complicated. So that's for, let's say, the global aspect of the negotiation. Then at some point, I mean, I think as scientist or negotiator or part of delegation, I think this is where your role stops, and you see the limitation of of the impact of what you're doing. And this is why sometimes you also have to find other ways to transfer the message, because I mean, the global stock takes is text actually, and the last one was quite weak actually. There is no really striking action written in there. And so how do you implement that? I mean, one of the aspects of implementation of the policies are to really convince the populations to really be active in the process, because there is a lot that you can do as a citizen actually. And I think this is where there is a boundary between the scientist and the citizen. And at some point, you really want things to advance, and then you have to find different ways to really transfer this information and try to engage people into action. And so we found ourselves to make a silent manifestation, a demonstration at the COP28 about sea level rise. And actually, it did a lot actually, because it has been widely then shared. So I mean, effectively, those kind of actions are starting to be a bit of activism. But I think at some point, it's important to get out of let's say, the lab and the classroom and things, and try to show people concretely what it means actually. So going into the cities and says, okay, in 10 years, sea level will be there, exactly. So when we did the demonstration at the COP venue, it was really on the line about plus 10 meters sea level rise, actually. So we chose the location on purpose. So actually, it is important to really concretely show that, so the young generation also see reality and not only numbers, because numbers can change also, because science is not perfect, and there are a lot of things that we do not understand very well. So activism, I think it's not, I mean, we always think about activisms about very extreme actions, but the activism is a full range of actions actually, and just having striking images, trying to engage people about these issues. I think it's another part of perhaps being a scientist at some point. I don't know. I'm still trying to understand where is the real boundaries. I think another example is about Valérie Masson-Delmotte. She was definitely the one in charge of the working group 1 of the IPCC for the last decade, and she started at the end to be a bit more activist. And actually, she was accused in the French newspaper to be too activist and not enough scientist. And so that's also something that is important to to face, that at some point your role is one, and if you become too extreme, then people start to not listen to you the same way. So I mean, there is as a scientist, there is a responsibility. However, I strongly support sometimes some of the actions just to show people what it means really, plus 2 meters sea level rise, plus 3 meters sea level rise. So that was my experience at COP. I mean, the last 3 COPs have been interesting for that. First COP was in Glasgow, then in Sharm el-Sheikh, and then in Dubai. Of course, Sharm el-Sheikh and Dubai were not really allowing a lot of demonstrations because of the country. But nevertheless, we had some space to really demonstrate. And to my opinion, I think in the next COPs, we will continue with the Chrysler Pavilion to make this kind of actions alongside with our scientific side events. You are muted, I think.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So yeah, I agree with you. We have to get out of our lab, and yeah, especially people like Euro, we have to support them, right? So yeah, thank you very much. So at present, University Malaya is on its way to becoming an observer at the COP meeting. So Mr. Chow Loon Wei, could you please enlighten us on the importance of university participation and observer status at this meeting? As we know, UTM has already been an observer at COP meeting.
Hello, Shiba. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Just to confirm, can you hear me clearly? Great, thank you. So I apologize because there was some issue with my Zoom application earlier, and I missed some of the speeches earlier. But in any case, please allow me to start off by thanking the Climate Change Advisory Committee and Climate Change Research Network for giving us the opportunity to be here just to share UTM's little experiences in participating in the COP. And also congratulations on the launching of the ebook. There was an impressive ebook. And also the successes of at COP28 as recounted by Dato' Ami earlier. So allow me probably to start with a bit of background on how UTM got into the COP. We started applying for the NGO observer status to the UNFCCC back in 2010. And we were fortunate back then, probably because there weren't too many applicants still. We were admitted into the UNFCCC the year after. So Professor Ho Chin Seong, who is actually the director of the UTM Low Carbon Asia Research Center, then started attending the COP since COP17 back in 2011. So a number of UTM top management officers also attended the COP together and made speeches at official as well as pavilion level side events and so on. And over the years, we have also continuously staged exhibitions to showcase our work. As for me, myself, my first COP attendance was for COP18 in Doha, and I have attended a total of 9 COPs since, though missing COP21 and 22. So on that background, back to the question that was given to me on the importance of universities participating and securing the observer status at the COP, let me start by maybe saying immediately that because climate change affects everyone, so everyone has a role to play and everyone's participation is highly important. So what more of a university, a research institution? So I think at the COP, apart from the main party level negotiations, non-party actors actually, especially at the subnational level, including subnational governments, government agencies, businesses, industries, and NGOs. And I mean, in our specific case, universities, I think we play very important roles in contributing potentially, whether indirectly or directly, to the negotiation process. As for our specific experiences, at each COP that we attended, basically we set two major scopes for ourselves. One had been to actually organize an official side event under the UNFCCC, as well as collaborate with various research institutions as well as partners to organize side events at the pavilion level. And it is through this kind of side events that we actually had the opportunity to actually bring along and invite senior government officials, policymakers, mayors, researchers to speak on the same platform on specific topics. And we would also normally take the opportunity to make important announcements and to make launching of projects or policies, thereby giving the university as well as our beloved country an international level visibility. And at times we also made joint declarations at side events, and over the process we of course received also very good feedback and comments from various parties and stakeholders, and we learned a lot through the process. So that was our first scope. And the second one was for us to actually set up an exhibition. In the early days of our participation, again, probably due to the number of exhibitors not being so many, we used to have been given a full 1 week or even 2 week kind of exhibition slots. But in the few recent years, especially after the COVID pandemic, exhibitions have been cut short to sometimes 2 or 3 days. So, but we still continue doing our exhibition, and it is through organizing these exhibitions that we actually advertised and promoted our university programs, our research work, and so on. And specifically, we also took the opportunity to showcase our research and consultancy works with various agencies, both at the national and international level. And I think we got the opportunity to make very good networking with many other universities, research institutions, even government agencies from other countries. And at least I could say a few of these networking have even materialized into actual consultancy and research collaborations. So for us in exhibiting at the COP, apart from receiving visitors to our exhibition booth, we also had the opportunity to visit other exhibitors, including, of course, party pavilions and so on. And along the way, actually, we had the opportunity to really learn a lot from what other people are doing, what the other parties are doing, and we are able to kind of benchmark our work with what the other parties are doing. And that learning process is actually amazing. I think it's probably not possible to recount all the benefits as well as importance of a university, a research institution participating at the COP. I guess it's probably good to summarize at this stage that actually participation by the university and our admittance as an observer with the UNFCCC, this actually is very, very important. So both a learning process for us as well as the opportunity to share with others our work. And then through the learning, we are able to, of course, infuse that into our further works in research and so on. And we even actually translate that into teaching programs. So I think one of the speakers mentioned earlier that it's quite difficult to really find university programs, courses, or perhaps even school curriculum that actually actively have included the climate change or climate crisis content. But at our level, we are working hard on that. So in UTM itself, our Bachelor of Urban and Regional Planning program, for example, we have introduced at least 3 electives that are specifically related to climate change. We have also included climate change as very important backgrounds in some of our courses, including land use planning, transportation planning, and a few other courses. And we have also played a very active role in disseminating the ideas at the school level by way of organizing what we call Eco Life Challenge competition at the school levels. So these are, I think, some of the things that we did. And so I think it is very, very important for universities to be involved in the COP process. So probably I stop there first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chow. Yeah, it is interesting to note that COP is a very good platform to make the networking as well as to increase our visibility, etc. And also good to note that UTM is considering climate change information in the curriculum, right? Next, we will go for our Q&A session. So thanks to all the panelists. Now the floor is open for the question and answer. Online participants, please use the Q&A function to ask questions. And in the meantime, maybe I will start with the first question. How is the role of academics, researchers, youth evolving at the COP meeting? Maybe Dr. Anna Pirani can start the discussion.
Sure. I mean, I think during this discussion, we've heard all the different facets of how academics and researchers and students are contributing. And I would say I've only been to a few COPs, but at least I see that the participation in a way is strengthening. One characteristic I really appreciated this last year to see in action was the inclusion of youth delegates with the party delegations. And I can share the experience from the European perspective. The youth delegates coordinate as much as the national delegates do. And so they develop their lines to take, their positions. And it's very important that the party delegations have a meeting to exchange and to share both sides of the positions that's been developed from the expert teams in the European Union, but to hear their views and hear their perspectives at a stage which is still formative for the European position. And then from there on, they participate in the negotiations. And I think this is incredibly important because, as Flo was saying, it's sometimes disappointing to see the text not being strong, and you may have concerns even on the scientific content. And so for youth delegates to be part of that process, understanding why these things come about the way they do is really important to have an in-depth perspective and be able to contribute effectively. So from an academic perspective, I am a researcher as well. I think it's really brought home for me this experience at the interface with science and policy. Again, something that was said earlier, understanding your role is really critical, and your role in which capacity you're there. Science is clearly, it should be a neutral, knowledge-based source to inform the policy making, which obviously is picking up on many other priorities coming from everyone's countries. And I have had this very fortunate experience of the IPCC context and then the negotiations. And in the IPCC, this role of the policy relevant but not policy prescriptive contribution of science and coming from around the world is really something that's very valuable. And so, for me, the IPCC role is critical, and this is how academics and researchers can contribute very effectively then to the negotiations, to what goes on in the negotiations. That's quite a different role to being an expert from your own institution in a pavilion, in a side event, where there is much more breadth in terms of how you would engage and how you would participate. And I have also enjoyed that role, speaking about very delicate policy questions. For example, are we reaching a level of warming of 1.5? What happens next? What is an overshoot? Can we talk about overshoot? In the negotiations, you can barely mention the name or the term of overshooting a level of warming and then coming perhaps back down again. But in the academic community, this is an area where a lot more research is needed, a lot more information is needed. And so it's an interesting experience to juggle these different types of roles. But when you're in one role, supporting the negotiations, the best you can do as a scientist is really be rigorous and balanced and understand. Then you have to understand also some of the positions, understand why certain countries are insisting on points and not others. Where is the possible incomprehension sometimes, where we often actually speak about the same things, but with different ways, and trying to find a common understanding. It's quite different to then being your own self as an expert in the context of the COP at these side events and things like that. So yeah, I think coming back to the actual question, I think the role is it's strengthening across the board. And so I think I give over the floor to my fellow panelists because they probably have different perspectives to share on this and different experiences. Thank you.
It's good to hear from you again, because you have different roles, right? Maybe we would like to hear from Dr. Florence.
Well, as Aina said, I mean, of course, when you are a scientist in the pavilion, you have more freedom to express yourself. Though still you are at COP, and you effectively have to be balanced, because otherwise it's a matter of credibility, and also, well, I mean, what we discovered with science over the past decades is that, I mean, the numbers that we are producing, somehow they're not changing that much now. I think we are somehow arriving there, and so it's just a matter of reducing a bit the uncertainties. And so now the thing that we have to face is how as scientists can we definitely convince the people that the science is not something to believe in, but they are just facts actually measured with instruments. And so we are just very neutral. I mean, we're just reading the thermometer or the probes, and we are just trying to transfer the information to the people. What I've seen and discussing with the different audiences was that some of the people speak about fear about climate change, and some others speak about business about climate change. Because climate change is a risk and opportunities. I mean, they come together. And so you also have to answer the different aspects of it. And some of the people are really worried. Some of the others are really looking for the next opportunity. And in between, you are the new generations that are trying to understand how to make the planet better, still having some opportunities for their future. So it's something that you effectively have to be balanced with. And I completely agree with Anna about that. And when it comes about speaking to delegation, then you definitely have to adopt another language. I mean, that's different. You cannot sometimes speak freely. It depends what is the person you are speaking to. But I had the chance to speak really freely with a few ministers without moderating too much the language. But it remains very informal. So I think what is important at COP is trying to really understand the context. And for example, I will say something a bit provocative now, but when I went in Dubai, I didn't really know about the history of States of Emirates, actually. And I went to a full Dubai tour before, and I read a little bit about the history and learned that actually fuel was somehow a kind of solution that they found after the economic crash, because they were doing some other kind of economic activities that somehow vanished because of competitions at international levels. And so, of course, when you go to a country like that and you negotiate a bit to reduce the use of fossil fuel and reduce the, I mean, so for them it means a big economical impact. And so that's really important to my opinion, to listen to anyone, to effectively understand where is the real problem, and how you can really help as much as you can as a scientist. But effectively, as a scientist, our role is really neutral. We need to transfer the information and explain how the system works, and that's sometimes helps the people to understand what are the best implementations, actions that they can really undertake, or you can also transfer the knowledge at different level of institutions when they come back to the country. So as a scientist, yeah, I would say our role is really like ambassador of the planet. So we have to be as neutral as we can. And then at some point, sometimes some people ask you as a citizen, what do you think? But then it has to be clear that this is your citizen opinion and not your scientist opinion.
Hey, Flo. I know that Mr. Chow has been into many COP meetings, so maybe you can explain, you can summarize how the role of academics or researchers are evolving in this meeting.
Thank you again, Shiba. I think both Anna and Florence basically captured very well what we, ourselves being academicians as well as researchers, can do actually at a COP. For us, probably a bit of background, because the approach that we use is what we call science to action. In a way, very well in line with what the two speakers mentioned earlier. I think we play a very important role in bridging science and policy making, and then not stopping there. We need to take it further into real action. That's why we call our approach science to action. So science, policy, and action on the ground. So what we are doing basically, therefore, is evidence-based policy making with implementation in mind from the very first day. And this is not easy. It's very, very challenging, as mentioned earlier. But I mean, the role is where we are able to clearly communicate our scientific findings and so on, how to translate that into clear policies, concrete policies that are in a way acceptable to politicians, to policy makers and decision makers and so on. And we stumbled along, we made many mistakes, and along the way we learned. So in a way, it's a process of what I would call sharing, learning, and sharing again, and learning again, and so on. But at every cycle, I think we do it at a different depth as well as different breadth. And so the learning is actually very invaluable. And so through our processes of preparing for now, climate action plans as well as low carbon society blueprints for 18 cities in Malaysia, and actively also sharing our experiences with other ASEAN countries. So we actually hope that we are able to actually help many other cities at a subnational level to start embracing the importance of science actually in helping cities to make policies, and then to make sure that these policies are actually implementable eventually. So these experiences as well, as I mentioned earlier, have been formalized in our context into university programs as well as our courses, and including community awareness programs, in the hope that we are able to kind of mainstream this among the community, and in particular to high school children, primary school children, as well as university students. We are hoping specifically that we are actually bringing up a new generation of professionals, future leaders, and so on, who are very well aware of the program. And the climate crisis and what important role they can play because after all, it's their future. And probably along the way, I think the role of academicians as well would be to try to understand the practical side of climate policy making, not to be too idealistic, about policy statements and so on. And once we have that realization, I think we are better able to adapt and be quite tactical in a way in crafting workable climate policies, statements, and so on, in the hope that this would be acceptable and welcome and received by most parties, and in particular, urban governors, mayors, urban managers, and so on. So as good as a policy is how much it will be implemented. And the policies, of course, need to be very well informed by research, by science. So I think that would be how I look at the important role of academicians as well as researchers in the process. Thank you.
Mr. Chow. Yes, science to action and also not to idealize. Yeah, it should be the way that we go, right? Arul, do you have anything to add on that?
I think academics play such an important role because I see it myself as a student, seeing how we learn all of these technical and scientific things as an environmental studies student, seeing it being taught in class, but we are still lacking, as students, we are still lacking those actions on the ground. We are not seeing how policies are created, how they are being implemented, and what are the real issues that are happening on the ground. There are a lot of things, that we can learn in the classrooms, but it gets boring sometimes if we don't really see how it plays, right? Especially when it comes to something so complicated such as multilateral, such as UNFCCC. A lot of students cannot really envision how is it important to their lives, how is this contributing to climate action in their personal lives. So I think we academics play an important part to connect those dots and making sure that students can see what is actually out there. And I also would like to emphasize the role of academics when speaking to the media. I've worked with many journalists with my NGO, and I've seen how so many journalists write about or want to write about the climate crisis in Malaysia, but they are lacking that information. And now in the age of AI and a lot of misinformation on the media, we see a lot of journalists just taking information out of the air. When in Malaysia we have so many experts, you can see here so many institutions that are already tapping into climate justice issues and climate research. But I feel a lot of journalists are still voicing the concern that a lot of scientists or lecturers are not going out of their lab to actually speak to the media. And I've also heard from academics themselves that the media are not asking the right questions. So I do feel that we need some kind of platform or some kind of way to connect these dots and making sure that our media actually talks about climate crisis issues, but they need to be scientific based, they need to be fact based. So in that way, they need to reach out to our climate experts in Malaysia. So they don't need to reach out to climate experts in other countries when we have them locally here. And I also think it's important when we talk about low carbon society. I've been very critical about this issue that all of us or all of our institutions are racing towards this low carbon universities. And I'm very critical about that because I do feel that, for example, rankings such as QR sustainability ranking are inherently colonial, and we are continuously pushing for low carbon society when in fact a lot of the realities that we are facing in our universities, just recently in UM as well, we are facing a lot of climate disasters facing our campus. Even recently with the current storms, we are facing so many losses, trees falling and so on. So I do think we need more conversation in adaptation as well. How are we going to adapt as a campus to adapt to all of these climate disasters that are worsening, and we are losing a lot of money because of this? And adaptation in terms of what is there for young people. How is our future going to look like with the climate crisis? So we must admit and acknowledge that the fossil fuel is ruining the world right now. And as university students, when we graduate in this era of energy transition soon, what kind of jobs will be available for us. There will be no jobs on a dead planet. So if we study right now as hard as we can, but there's no jobs in the future, then how are we going to adapt? So what is the strategy for that? I think not only the university institution have to address that, but students also need to demand that the institution acknowledges these things. So we need not only climate justice to be taught in classes about sustainability and ESGs, but also how can we track climate negotiations? What has been done by the countries in terms of climate action, and that we also need to focus on adaptation. I think our academics also play an important role when it comes to engaging with governments and ministries, because I do feel there's a lack of information, there's gaps of information. When I engage with government or ministers, I see that they want to do something, but it feels like they are not well versed enough about certain issues. One of the examples is, for example, in terms of gender and climate. Recently, the CEDAW sessions have been happening, and I do feel like Malaysia is not taking steps towards this, acknowledging that we need more gender aggregated and gender-driven climate solutions. That is just one of the examples. So I do feel that academics can play huge roles even outside of the classrooms. I've worked with a lot of academics that have worked outside of classroom, doing activism at the same time, and also encouraging their students to write and think about critical issues when it comes to climate issues. So yeah, there's a lot of things that academics can do.
Good suggestion, Arul. And it's really important to have the science communication in the climate crisis and also focus on adaptation, right? So these are very important. So, Prof. Shalisa, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, certainly academics have a lot to contribute, both at national and international level. But what is important is they need to understand the problem that occurs in the real world, and be able to do their research and study to solve, to find solutions for real problems. And listening firsthand to issues faced by the world, I think the academics can gain insight into the actual challenges encountered by regulatory bodies and decision-making processes and enforcement issues. So their presence at COP, I think, would be very important. And interestingly, with the global open science movement and the UNESCO open science recommendation, researchers and the academia will have to make themselves more visible and to adopt openness, transparency, inclusivity, which calls for continual engagement with all stakeholders and including other knowledge systems as well. And also to include citizen science and participatory from the society. So that will make a more impactful outcome of research and academic output. So I think this transition will see researchers, academics and students being able to contribute in more ways at COP. Yeah,
thank you very much. So I think I will go for one more question, and this is to Arul. So what was something that you learned about international environmental negotiations at COP?
Every time I go to COP, there's always new things that I learn. But after going to COPs, I think one of the biggest things I learned is that climate issues and environmental issues are not just an isolated issue. It's very political as well. And when you step into COP negotiation spaces, you can really see how this plays. I was really surprised when I went to one negotiation session last year in Dubai. I see how all these countries actually contested on very specific texts, even up to like the commas, up to the words that they use. And it can go on for hours until the end of the day. And so it really teaches me that it's very political, and that what I learn in my classroom, and all the knowledge when it comes to climate science, environmental, but I think it's also important that we need to emphasize that this is all political. It all goes back to political will and also money. So that is why I hope COP29 this year can further that in terms of climate finance. That is also another technical aspect, right, when it comes to climate finance. so I would say that is the biggest realization when I stepped into this climate justice activism. I really thought, it's really just about recycling, all those basic things. But going into these negotiations made me realize that, this is definitely something bigger. All countries have their own needs. So yeah, it's very political.
Thank you very much. I think maybe Dr. Anna Piraini can add
Yes, I'm happy to compliment. I'll just say from my own experience, it's been very interesting, I suppose nearly a decade working really at the science policy interface and in a way seeing it work. So that was very encouraging for me. So we started at the start of the 6th assessment cycle of the IPCC. And I think as Mr. Chow said, things go up and down, you learn and you pick up again and you keep going. And we had a very difficult reality at the first part of our experience in the IPCC assessment. So we were charged with producing the special report on what it means to limit warming to 1.5. And the scientific community came together, and this effort made by academics all around the world to respond to this priority question that was embedded in the Paris Agreement was really remarkable. And people went beyond, so we say, the call of duty, both to develop the underlying knowledge and also to produce this assessment, which has its own mechanisms that take time. And very, very demanding experience. And it was delivered in time to the COP in Katowice, but in 2018, but what happened, it wasn't even welcomed. And so the disappointment, I think, for the scientific community was, difficult to describe. And it really made you lose faith in a way of how the negotiations proceed and the role of science and whether it actually does contribute your efforts beyond your day job to really support these processes, whether it's all worth the efforts. But then through the rest of the cycle, we did come back up again, and we have gone through cycles of sort of positive experiences. And we've seen in the Glasgow COP the science underpinning the negotiations being really flagged center in the decision texts. And then coming through to the global stocktake, I think if you start with a lens going through the texts, it's quite remarkable to see just how much of it is based on the IPCC assessed and approved conclusion languages. And so there, for me, it's certainly a very important experience to see just how strong that science policy interface is and how important it is. And so in a way, this is my real learning that I've managed to bring away, especially since the last COP. And it strengthens my sort of engagement in really protecting that science policy interface and really promoting it. So I wanted just to say that obviously the 7th assessment cycle has started, and for experts in Malaysia, it's really, really critical to become involved. And you have Professor Joy Pereira, who's incredible co-chair of Working Group 3 on the mitigation of climate change. And the ways in which you can contribute to the IPCC are sort of many-fold. I mean, you can become a selected author, but also an expert reviewer, and bringing that knowledge into the process. It's really, really critical. The other thing I learned firsthand now as a negotiator is the other side of operating in that space, and the need to listen, to understand, and the patience that it takes to really see your what you see as incredibly important, especially when talking about science, because I'm at the interface with the research and systematic observations agenda item you would say is less political, and this is where we really highlight the research needs coming from countries, and also make the statements of the latest knowledge that we have, the latest statements from the World Meteorological Organization. What are we experiencing on the planet now as we negotiate? But in actual facts, it turns into a very difficult negotiation. In fact, in Bonn, just a few weeks ago, we delayed the opening of the closing plenary because in the end, it had to go through thanks to a chair's proposed text that we had not reached consensus. We were almost coming away with nothing after 2 weeks discussing the science. So this is really remarkable. And at the end of the day, it is a question of understanding why, understanding what the sensitivities are. I wanted to pick up on what Florence said earlier about understanding the context in these different countries, that you maybe have different positions in the negotiations, but they have very good reasons why they have those positions. And if we do understand each other, we're going to be making progress, obviously. So it's a very steep learning curve, but I highly recommend it to become involved at any and all levels. Over to you.
Anyone from other panels would like to add on this?
As I say to Anne, as Anna said, and I think going to COP is an incredible experience as a scientist, but also as a person. First of all, because there's many people from different culture, and that's very rich, and that's very intense meeting. If you really want to, you can definitely be completely busy 24 hours. So each time I come back to COP, I feel very exhausted because you talk to many people about different things, and that's great. I mean, that's one of the best experience I had so far. I mean, because of course, as a scientist, you love science, and otherwise you would not be a researcher. However, I think transferring the knowledge to people is also something that is really enriching for the people, but for yourself also. It's part of the growth as a community, as scientists, but also as your personal growth. And I think for people at any stage, could be from students to senior researchers, I highly recommend, if they can, this COP process or United Nations processes, like science to policy in general, to really engage, because that's definitely something that complements your experience as an academic person, but it could be also for people that are not academic to meet with academic people. So that's the other way around, actually. And I have been making a lot of progress in outreach since I'm going to the COP, actually, because each COP is different. And each time I find a different way of transferring the information. So it's a challenge on the moment, because most of the time at the Chrysler Pavilion, we have to meet with a delegation that was not planned in the calendar. So you have to prepare information last moment. So you really have to boost your creativity of how to transfer that. On another hand, during the first COP, my first COP, I met with some students at the of Glasgow station, and I decided to hang out with them at the beginning to discover what was the COP actually. And those students were from Washington University. Some of them were talking about climate, the finance of climate change. Some of them were talking about the climate justice, and those were concepts I heard about at that time, but I was not really familiar with too much. And I chose to hang out at the COP with them the first day, actually. And we stop at pavilions I would personally, as scientists, perhaps not stop by, like resource pavilion or this kind of things, water pavilion or this kind of things. And I really enjoyed the experience sharing with them this moment, because I learned a lot about how they think the future. And I mean, I am 40 years old scientist, so I am not old, but I'm not, I'm not young enough anymore. And I was hanging out with those students they were 20 years old students, and I really enjoyed that part. So each time I go to COP, I really like to hang out with the new generation of people. Because somehow I see a lot of optimism in them. They're eager to really learn and understand. And I think what I've seen after the Glasgow COP is that there have been a turnout in this. I mean, more people are really looking for understanding, and understanding with the right information. And so I think it's a real progress in terms of education at the international level. So that's my experience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Florent. We have a question from one of our online participants, Dr. Zida. So she wanted to know from the panelists who have more experience attending multiple COPs, in your perspective, what is the most significant achievement of COP28 in your respective area of concern, and are there critical areas that need more work and clear negotiation in COP29? Maybe this question I can direct to Mr. Chow.
That is a tough question. Thank you. It's just quite unfortunate, the specificity of my experience at COP28, because when I was there, this particular one, unfortunately, I was quite ill, and I wasn't able to really keep track of what really happened on the ground directly. But of course, afterwards, reading some of the analysis that have been put forward and so on, some of the issues have been mentioned earlier. I think we saw how some of the wording, our intention to actually push forward, how we are able to really take concrete actions to achieve the goal of keeping or limiting global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius and so on. So even wording like phasing out, or phasing down, that kind of thing, we do see that. Coming back to the whole process of it, probably I would say that going to the COP sometimes is a very complex process, and it can feel very frustrating at times. But also it's a process that I think we know very well that is indispensable. So these things happen. I think COP28, we've got some successes eventually, consensus being reached and so on. But we see that in terms of the real commitment, there is still a long way to go. And moving ahead in relation to what we can do more for COP29, I think we need to really work hard towards somehow cementing more concrete actions for nations, party level, as well as subnational level, for us to transition effectively towards carbon neutrality, hopefully by 2050. There's really no time to waste. And if we miss that threshold, chances are that we will never get to that limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Limiting the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And all these need to be built on science, built on the first global stocktake. So more emphasis need to be given in that, I think. And we need to learn to also give more recognition for, as well as emphasis on, the role of subnational entities, especially cities, regions, in addressing the climate crisis. Town planning, for example, which is what I personally profess, I think plays a very important role in this. We need to have more opportunities for the field of town planning, built environment in a way, to be involved in the process. And I think it was mentioned earlier, climate finance, the materialization of climate funds, especially making them available for developing countries. And this should both cover very well the mitigation and adaptation fronts. And I think eventually all this should not stop at only words. And talking is cheap, it's easy to talk, but the big challenge is how do we then make this actionable? So I really think we need to walk the talk, and we must act now. And this is a very tall order. I think learning from our experiences at the COP, negotiations requires that is a complete consensus to be achieved. Even if one party disagrees with even a little comma and so on, then that thing will not get done. So on the whole, we need to really work hard to somehow communicate very well. This was also mentioned earlier. What I learned through the process is that there is such a diverse segments of parties and so on, and normally each comes with its own agenda. Many of these agenda, of course, are shared and common, but perhaps also there are many more which can be quite specific to each party, and quite a number of these can be quite conflicting and contesting. So, which is why negotiation plays a very key role in here. And I think we need to really put much more effort into this. And on our front, really, because as an NGO observer organization, we do not have, direct involvement in the negotiation process. But we do think that we play a very important role of the negotiation process in how we communicate scientific findings and so on, how we take a softer approach to actually talk to policymakers and politicians. And I think that actually is a very important role that academicians and researchers, scientists can play, not to pitch ourselves against them. I think Aro said it very correctly that climate change process is a very political process. So it doesn't do us good if we distance ourselves from it. In a way, we should embrace it, I would say. I mean, in a way, if you can't beat them, join them, but don't become them. You know, we are very clear about our position, but I mean, we need to know how to tactically negotiate and kind of play our way through so that we try to understand each other better, which is why, again, coming back to communication, that becomes really, really important, to have an open mind, to listen to all the parties involved and so on, and to be able to also communicate in an openly as well as, if I may, moderate kind of manner, not to create conflicts and so on. So I think these are things that we probably need to put further effort into. And I mean, I'm not sure how that can really be materialized in COP29, but I do think these are all perhaps very important elements to hopefully see a more successful COP come this November. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chow. Any of the online panelists would like to add on this?
Yes, I'm happy to come in. Yeah, I mean, in terms of successes of the last COP, I would re-emphasize the role of IPCC knowledge transfer. It was indeed very much at the base of the global stocktake decision making, and within the global stocktake, I think that was an achievement in itself. Obviously, paragraph 28 on transitioning away from fossil fuels. The language we can debate about for sure, but it's certainly the first time fossil fuels have been mentioned in a decision text of the UNFCCC in its 30 years of existence or so, which is remarkable. But parties collectively agreed to this language. So finally, we made an important step. In terms of the language of transitioning away, I would say it's more directly traceable to the IPCC assessment rather than phase out. The other dimension of the decision text that I found incredibly positive was the alignment to 1.5. So there was a concrete, the text throughout, you'll see, is all about aligning to 1.5. In fact, President Al-Jaber, he said the 1.5 goal was the North Star for him and his work in the COP. And I think there is an invigorated emphasis on high ambition for the next round of NDCs that will come out in 2025. And obviously we will see how much the emissions have or will be promised to be bending. But I think we do need this political optimism to move forward. Other aspects that I found were very good outcomes of the global stocktake, despite starting from should we say, almost a blank page, was the establishment of the global goal on adaptation. And having seen some of the back room, shall we say, of that negotiation, it's quite interesting to see how, from the technical phase, there was not a concrete proposal on the table where there was consensus. The consensus was actually not there by the end of the first week. And it was very much in the last days of the ministerial work that the global goal on adaptation could be agreed. And I think that's one area where, I mean, coming back to some comments that were made earlier, the importance of emphasizing adaptation. We do have more concrete now ways forward based on the work on developing indicators on adaptation. You know, the global goal on adaptation text, it talks about thematic indicators of climate change. So, for example, around water, security, urban environments, culture, and so on. And then there are the indicators around the adaptation policy cycle. And I think that has really kicked off a lot of work, both in the UNFCCC, but also in relation to the academic community on trying to develop a comprehensive perspective that can really inform policymaking internationally on adaptation and keeping track of things like efficacy of adaptation, adaptive capacity, and tracking loss and damage. And clearly the establishment of the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund was a major outcome of the COP28, and also the, shall we say, the launch of the Santiago network that I'm following, not inside, but I very much follow with interest all the work that they're doing in an accelerated manner to get that technical body off the ground. And just, I would say some of the challenges, I wanted to also pick up some of the challenges just for sharing again experiences. It's incredible to arrive in a COP and not have a solid, shall we say, draft decision text or draft conclusion text coming from the intersessional negotiations in Bonn that happen every June. We saw that with the global stocktake text. We arrived in Dubai without a starting point, and it all had to be hashed out. And then in the last couple of nights or 20 or 48 hours, which is crazy. That's how the negotiations work in the end. But the same went for the global goal and adaptation, which was very much, I think in the end, surprisingly successful in being so concrete and in a way that can actually be picked up by academics around the world, and also agencies to enhance our capacity to inform that part of the adaptations and monitoring progress collectively and so on. So thanks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anna. How about Florence? Do you have anything to add on to this?
Yes, I would be happy to comment. So I was definitely not involved really in the negotiation of the global carbon stocktake. So from the Chrysler perspective, we were a bit unhappy on things that have been mentioned or not in the text. I think it's a matter of wording. I think some progress have been made, but we need to make much more progress. During the COP, what the Chrysler Pavilion is trying to do, the Chrysler Pavilion is held by the IC, it's International Climate Chrysler. And what we're trying to come out with is a text that is so far ratified by, I think now about more than 20 countries. It's an ambition on melting ice, actually. So it just explains why it's important in the Chrysler, what are the thresholds for the Chrysler, and so what are the consequences of Chrysler disappearance. So it could be permafrost thawing, or snow areas decaying, or sea ice melting, or glacier melting, ice sheets melting. So it's the entire Chrysler, actually. It's not only centered on ice. And so it has been a few COPs now, like that Pam Pearson is trying to lead this on ambition of melting ice. So each COP we are meeting with new countries that are trying to join the action, so this is what we are trying to do concretely at the COP, and then at the same time, alongside with ambition of melting ice, we are also trying to put some keywords about the Chrysler in the global carbon stocktake. So that's one of the goals for us. Each COP, to some extent, is very successful from this perspective, because we reach out with different populations that are facing adaptation to climate change anyway, and or population in the mountains that are lacking of water resources because glaciers are retreating, or these kind of things. And to some extent, then there is some actions after that are implemented with local populations. And so I know that after the COP, there are some outcomes directly coming from the discussions, and to some extent, I feel that is already successful from this point of view. And as we say, there are different levels. The global carbon stocktake is very global, and I agree with Dr. Cho and Anna that it's very important that we continue the effort at international levels, because somehow it seems a bit depressing when we hear from newspaper, but actually there is a huge amount of optimism during those negotiations. So people are meeting there from all countries, so all parties are there for a lot of days and preparing the COP through the year before. So people are really willing to achieve something. So I think it's an important energy, and it will drive to optimism to face climate change. And but there is still this offset with adaptation at national and local levels. That's why I say the dimension as a citizen, I think it's very important in this aspect, because citizens can change the way the city is facing climate change by influencing investments and influencing some adaptation plans. For example, here in Trieste, last winter, we had our shore completely destroyed by a big storm surge. That was very impressive. And this is because sea level is also rising very much in this area. And it's amplifying all the extreme weather events, actually. And we had a big poll then the months after to understand how we wanted to protect our shore and whatever. So I think it's really important to bridge the international negotiation at the local level. And I think it's going through discussions that you have with the national delegations, but also the one that you have in the blue zone during the cycling, or in the green zone with activists, NGOs actually, and also proceeding with education and transfer knowledge outside of the COP at other UN events and local events actually. I find myself that it's very powerful and it works pretty well. So we just have to keep on. So I'm rather optimistic too on this process somehow.
Thank you very much, Dr. Florence. Aro, do you want to look at, do you want to say what is the critical area, and also, what was the COP28?
Okay, I think there are a lot of negotiations happening at COP. One of the areas that I track is the issues of energy transition and also gender and indigenous peoples. I think one of the successes that I could see was the conversation about energy transition, mainly because I feel that it is very personal for our country, like Malaysia. I mean, all countries are now racing towards low carbon economies and so on. But when what we really need to discuss are the technicalities of it, right? How do we really transition? Now we are seeing Malaysia, for example, we have big ambitions in terms of renewable energy capacities, but we also need to address the human rights issue, where there are now mega projects happening, such as mega dams, but not really acknowledging the rights of the people that live there and impacting them in negative ways. So there was a lot of conversation in that, in the consultations as well, with ILO and energy transition. And it's also important that during the discussion we intersect the issues of labor and energy transition, because we need to remember that a lot of workers will be impacted by the energy transition. So I think this was a really huge opportunity for Malaysian academics and also our government ministries to actually be in these spaces and learn and engage with the UN people there to talk about how Malaysia can contribute in this and learn from this and learn from other countries as well. And so I think another point that I learned from this COP is that the importance of recognizing intersectionality when it comes to climate activism. If you were at COP, you would see that there was continuous call out about the genocide that is happening in Gaza. And I'm really proud that the young people keep pushing and the scientists keep pushing on this issue and calling it out at COP. So there's this, recognition that the climate justice cannot happen when a war is still going on. So I think those are the most important things I feel like that came out of COP.
Thank you, Aro. Actually, we are running out of time. Just wanted to know whether Prof wanted to add on anything on this.
Well, I just wanted to stress on the multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral perspectives that are very important to consider in every time that we look into finding a solution. And this would require an integrated approach in looking at issues to come up with solutions that will benefit the society as a whole. I think it's important to involve different communities and social actors in coming up to an understanding of the real issue and how we come up with a solution.
Thank you very much, Prof. Actually, there is one more question. Maybe we quickly answer this question. The question is from the online participant, Atira. Disparities in knowledge about climate change are still visible, which can influence the imbalance of climate negotiation. So her question is, what can be done by the academics to narrow down the gap and pick up the correct themes to address, especially in our research, so that it will be parallel with topics negotiated at COP. Dr. Anna, do you want to take this question?
Sure. First, I want to make 2 points about this very good question. One, in terms of, should we say, the knowledge, I have to rephrase, knowledge that is contributing to the climate negotiations. I think picking up on some of the points that we made earlier, the role of academics in supporting nationally the transfer of knowledge is critical. And that goes both for citizens and the community more broadly, but also the negotiators themselves, or the functionaries, shall we say, that are at that interface in the negotiations. What I see works very well within the European context is having expert advisors who accompany the negotiators. And so I wonder, through your mechanisms, it's possible to strengthen that aspect to support the Malaysian delegation. It's really can be very, I would say, the efficacy of this contribution can be very valuable, make it very valuable to do. In terms of the research itself, I mean, just to share my own attempt to try and understand where the research priorities and the gaps are, I sort of scanned the global stocktake text, and I found it in itself really inspiring, actually, because there is a series of very interesting scientific topics that are, you would say there are knowledge gaps still, or there is a need for more understanding. And so I had a list which, for example, includes scenarios towards resilient development with low emissions, sustainable development, poverty eradication, just transition. There's a lot to be done to understand complex and cascading risks, loss and damage, both extreme events and slow climate change, low probability, high impact events, and so on and so forth, potential tipping points. There's so much to be done on the assessment of adaptation, the development of climate impact inventories, disaster risk reduction, and the bridging of the scales with humanitarian assistance and the climate change problems. There's, as Professor just said, the integrated and multi-sectoral solution space, which is really needing to be unpacked a lot more nationally, as well as more, so say, at larger scales, regionally or globally. Issues around climate resilience, the nexus with nature and biodiversity and ecosystems. And then there are aspects in terms of the undertaking of the science, for example, participatory approaches or developing knowledge that also incorporates a broader knowledge base related to the issues around gender, indigenous knowledge, local knowledge systems. And then there is the role of artificial intelligence to really actually in the solution space to more efficiently scale up transformative climate solutions, both for adaptation and mitigation. So these are just my own sort of rather quick analysis of the global stocktake text itself. And so depending on the areas that you're particularly working on, for example, I think the global goal and adaptation is very inspiring in terms of identifying research topics that really could merit from a lot of attention from academics in our own countries to really make progress in the negotiations going forward. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Just to come back to one of the areas I follow in the negotiations and the experience just now in Bonn, it's the research and systematic observations agenda item. And in Bonn, we treat the research parts of that agenda. And when you read the conclusions that came out of that negotiation, you'll see some very high level comments about the need for more balanced contribution of research. We need to address the research needs that are relevant for the negotiations and so on. But this is despite the fact we spent 2 weeks actually trying to nail down some signals on concrete research needs that were important for parties to include in the conclusions, so that the academic community could see those signals and rally around making progress in a coordinated fashion and so on. But unfortunately, the negotiations were such that we could not come to an agreement. So we had to step back and go to a consensus text that missed out on all the substance in a way. But it is possible to find out more about the topics that were highlighted as research needs, where there was a lot of consensus around the world, I would say. So the information is in there in the decision text. Sometimes it's not so clear, but obviously we'll see what comes out through the IPCC process, where governments also highlight their research needs in the sort of parallel track that are negotiations in the IPCC. So we'll see soon the scoping of the 7th assessment reports, and that will clearly highlight also the areas where the themes that are really critical to address going forwards, and that will be supporting the negotiations in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anna Pirani. Yes, really looking forward for the 7th assessment report to look at the gaps, and which is aligned to the topics that negotiated at COP. I'm afraid that we need to stop here as we don't have enough time. I'm not going to summarize, because we discussed a lot of topics ranging from a role of academics to the priorities of issues at COP29. So this concludes our session. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to all panelists and participants for attending our discussion, and it has been a pleasure to serve as the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.